Hello, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host of Fiberchats, and my guest today is from South Africa. And I'll try to pronounce your name. I've been practicing. It's Xoli Ngcoza.
Um, Xoli was fine, and then Ngcoza,
Oh, it
you
also
know,
has the clicking sound.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's the
I'll have to practice my clicking.
yes.
Well,
I'll teach you. I'll give you some lessons.
thank you. Lovely to have you on my channel. Um, So let's start with I don't even know where to start with you because you do so many things. You're not just a knitwear designer, you're also a doula, you're also a DJ. I mean, it's just like there is so much to you. Let's start with how you got into the knitting though in the first place.
It was 2008, and as I told you a while back, that I work as a caregiver in Connecticut, and so my first client had Alzheimer's, and I didn't know how to deal with it. So I noticed that she would never remember what happened 5 minutes ago, and then I figured a way to trick her mind, and I would do laundry and then bring it to the table and tell her that we need to fold laundry. And I noticed that she would sit there and be calm and really not realize that she's been folding the same clothes over and over. And then I'll take the clothes and take them to another room, undo them, and bring them back to the table. And she would do that, and I realized that as she was doing all of that, she was very quiet, content, and she seemed happy because she was working with her hands. And a couple of months later, I'm just curious, and I'm just opening up closets in her condo. And I happened to open this one closet where all of a sudden there was just this yarn and old knitting projects that were stacked in there. And the daughter later on told me that she didn't want to get rid of them because she understood how much her mother really enjoyed knitting. And so she just put them in the closet, even though she knew that maybe, the mother might not get back into knitting again. She just put them there. So I pulled a few projects out, and I went to my client and I said, well, why didn't you ever tell me that you knitted? And she looked at me and she said, oh yeah, I knit. And I said to her, well, I used to knit as part of home economics in South Africa, but I hated it. I didn't like it. I was young. So can you get me back into it? And she said, okay. And so from there on, I started knitting with her, as I was working with her. Right. And I didn't realize that I would get into it. My first project, which was a long scarf, took me like 2 years because then I was seasonal. I was just only knitting in the wintertime. So I'd have like a winter where I would pull out the same project and knit. But the day I finished, I got so excited that the first thing I did was go into a yarn store and start buying yarn. And so that's how I started knitting.
That's so funny. I want to ask you about the South African social economics class, though. Like, it seems like an unlikely place to teach knitting out of all the things possible for home economics. Like, why is that a part of the program? How long is it being taught for?
I think it was an old school thing back then, but home economics is something that ended, I think, right after my high school finished, because some of my cousins who are younger than me never even did home economics. I don't even think they know what home economics class is, because it's part of that subject that was just taken out of, the curriculum. Right. So for me and people that were my age, I think we're the last generation, and it was part of something that my grandparents grew up in, so that was the reason why it was added in there. And I think they still need it. I don't know now whether kids do it or it's something that they have to do different, where they have to pay like a different price or go somewhere to do a craft like that. but I think it's very important that maybe school need to bring that back, you know, because kids are spending so much time on the internet these days.
Right. And I think
Yeah.
it's like also like an ultimate pleasure at actually creating something with your own hands and being able to put it on you, you know, and just wear it.
Yeah, but it's funny because they don't, kids nowadays don't see it that way, you know. I mean, I understand they're kids. I didn't see it that way either, you know. I would tell my cousins kids. I had one who came to visit one time and they looked at me like I was crazy when I said, well, if you guys want to sit in the house instead of looking at the phones, we might as well knit, you know. And they looked at me, they rolled their eyes, and just didn't register. It doesn't register to them. So I always say maybe when they are older, you know, and they could take in that information in a different way, then they'll be like, oh yeah, this is what Auntie was talking about, you know. Yeah.
It's actually funny because my oldest son, he's 25 and he's an engineer. So, like, he's excellent at math. And lots of times I like to calculate the amount of stitches in a shawl. And when it's like something like triangular shawl or something like some strange configuration, it's easier for me to call him and tell him, listen, there's like that many stitches on top, that many stitches on the bottom, figure out the whole thing, how many stitches there is. So he always like helps me with math of it. And last time he came home, he's like, you know, I think maybe I should learn how to knit just to see what it's all about, because I
Oh,
hear all this like knit and purl, and I want to know like what is it you're talking about, you know. So there is hope.
it's amazing how you actually you know, included your son in your projects, you know. That's just so amazing, because yes, there's a lot of calculation, and I don't think a lot of people realize that knitting is actually maths,
Right.
you know. And they think you just go and go and go, you know. But I'm so amazed at the fact that you actually included your son to say this and figure out how many stitches and how many rows. That's how I create my patterns, you
Right.
know. I go casting the stitches and then, you know, going off by the rows,
Well,
and then
let's slow down for a second, because
okay.
here we are talking about you knitting a scarf for 2 years, right?
Yeah.
And suddenly we're talking about you being a designer and calculating your patterns. What was that journey like?
I got frustrated with knitting because I just really I couldn't read the patterns. They were too confusing for me. And first of all, knitting is it's so broad. There's the European style of knitting, and then there's the American style of knitting, and I mean intercontinental. I just couldn't get it, you know. And I would sit down and look at the pattern, and I would realize that I just bought this yarn. All I wanted to do was knit, you know, and I couldn't figure out, because some patterns are, you know, they work with the gauge and it has to be certain centimeters or inches, and I just couldn't figure that out, you know. And I got so frustrated in such a way that I want to still enjoy this craft, but I don't want to get, you know, frustrated. And secondly, I didn't have any time to figure that out because I have a 24-hour living job, you know. So if I'm at somebody's house working, most of my hours are caring for this person. I just want to sit down when I finally have my break to knit. I don't want to figure out a pattern. Then I figured that, okay, you know what, I'm gonna do this casting and then go up, and then I'll figure out when to decrease. And then I started using a notebook, and I counted my stitches. And then I said, okay, if I do this in a perfect way, which it was a process that took a while, where I would like unravel, and because I was trying to perfect this one first pattern, so that by the time I do the next one, I don't have to look at, you know, the head or the sweater that I made. I can just look at my notes, you know. And that's how I started my patterns.
So the first pattern you wrote, what was the process of like giving it to the world?
I was very anxious because, um, you know, old knitters, they believe in, you know, their own ways of knitting. So I was very anxious at am I doing it right? Did I do it? But I was excited that I needed my first sweater, but it was interesting because it was simple. Everything that I was afraid of that intimidated me all of a sudden looked so simple, so and exciting at the same time. So yeah, that was my first process, and I remember saying to myself, wow, that's so easy, but I had to do, I don't draw much, but I had to do like a sketch so that I just remember it in my brain. But I remember writing it down and figuring out that, oh, I'm gonna have to start with the ribbon and then move on to stockinette, so I did like a little sketch in that. And that was it. And I said, this is basically easy. I knit on the flat, I don't knit on the round. So for me, that was easy. And I also enjoy the process of joining the two pieces together. That for me is like the relaxing part of, oh my God, the sweater is almost finished. And now I'm weaving everything together, and then right after that, I just never stopped making sweaters.
So how did you find your own community, so to say? Like people who buy your finished projects, people who like do your designs, like how did you find them?
So I moved into a town called Westport here in Connecticut. And I moved there because I was mostly working with clients there. And I loved the town. And I realized that every time when I would be on my day off, I would still go back to the town because that was where I started going into my first knitting store, Westport Yarns. And so I would spend my Sundays there when I'm off and just buy yarn and sit in the couch and start knitting. That's my first knitting community that I met. And then from there, I would get tips from different markets to do, here and there. Crazy enough, I did my first holiday market when I started selling my knitwear in LA. I don't know why I went to LA because I loved it, but then LA weather and the knitwear, it just didn't go. But I said, I'm going to LA. But I went to LA and I got my first clients in LA because they go to skiing in, close by. And then I moved on to going upstate New York, close in the Catskill, Hunter Mountain, around the Catskill area. And then from there, I moved on to doing the Westport Farmers Market. And that was a big, big community for me because, the support was just amazing, And then I started moving on to getting invited to, there's another place called Terrain, which is a beautiful store. They sell outdoor furniture, plants, and then inside they've got all candles and things like that. So they started inviting me to do pop-ups, and then I started doing pop-ups there. So my first pop-up at Terrain was last year during COVID, which was amazing, so I've been doing pop-ups with them seasonally. Yeah. And finding community like your clients, it's like it comes in waves, sometimes you go to a market, you expect to have a good day of selling, and then sometimes it just doesn't work out the way it does. But for me, having to be outside, because I spend a lot of time inside knitting my garments, and sizing for me is a little bit of a challenge, because I'm so petite. So it becomes challenging where, how do I get to knit for somebody who's 6 foot or whatever? So going to markets, even if I didn't make any sales, or even if I made few sales, I'm able to chit chat with people, and also they'll tell me, what type of yarn they like, like they what size they like, what colors they like. So I listen to all of that.
Do you ever have people tell you like why your items are so expensive? Like, how did you decide to stand up for yourself, to decide that this is what your labor is worth and stick by that?
I mean, I still get it every single time. I'm in terrain, which is the most expensive place where you can buy house plants or a vase. You know, I'll hear somebody say, "Oh, they're so expensive," and I'm like, I used to get so offended, you know, but then at the same now I'm like, I don't really think people know what goes into knitting or what goes into anything that's handcrafted, you know. So I don't really entertain ignorant people. You know, in my head, sometimes I would really like to say it out loud that, well, if you go to Walmart, you'll get, you know, a knitwear that you can pay for, but I don't want to come off as that type of person. I just think we all need to do our researches and stop ignoring, you know, and being ignorant at other people's, you know, decisions and why they charge them the price that they charge. And sometimes you just have to let people be. They don't know, you know. But for me, I know that my items are really worth it because yarn, first of all, is really expensive. And especially with COVID now, it just even went up high more, you know. And I try to choose the best yarn and warm because it gets cold in the wintertime in Connecticut, you know. And if somebody, you know, wants to buy my garment, yes, they do. If they don't want to buy it, I totally understand it. But I always happy and appreciative of people that really believe in my craft. I mean, I had one lady who came in and said, this remind me of my mom, and just basically, you know, just bought the sweater because it just reminded her of the mother who just loved to knit, but the mother passed away. So, and every time I see her at the farmer's market, she's like, I still enjoy your sweater. I still enjoy your beanie, you know, so I'm always appreciative of those people. And when I have bad days where my business is not going very well, I know that I have people that still, you know, that enjoy my craft, you know, that I look back into that and it keeps me going.
So how do you decide, talking about bad days, right? How do you decide what to make? Like is there like, do you have a bestseller that like you always rely on? Do you like to experiment with things? How do you decide like what to make?
I used to I used to drive myself crazy and make all different sweaters up until I realized that no, that's not it. And then now I'm doing like I think 3 different types of sweater, which is like a cardigan, a long cardigan, and then just a regular jumper, you know. Now, what I'm deciding on is keeping those 3 same patterns and then playing around with color. For me, color is the thing. That's just it. I play around with color. If I have a lot of leftover yarn, I have one sweater that I created from the leftover yarn, and that became one of the most amazing best sweaters that, you know, everybody wanted it, but unfortunately one of my friends, you know, bought it, and I still get a lot of requests from it, you know. So now I keep making the same design with different colors.
Right.
It's just colors for me. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite?
And all my sweaters are my favorite.
No, but like favorite color, like something you always gravitate towards.
Oh yeah, I used to. It's the fall color, the mustard. The mustard is my favorite color. Yeah, especially the beginning of fall. That, you know, it's just, it says leaves are falling, you know, pumpkin colors, you know, yeah. So that's my favorite.
It's my favorite season too, so I love those as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So what about accessories? So you do sweaters, but you also do some accessories, right?
I do shoes, and then well, that's different. I started doing mittens. with also leftover yarn, it's like a little experiment that I just started doing this year. I did it a while ago, but I wasn't selling them. I made them for myself. But this year I just want to see, if they would go well. And I just made a few, and then I just said to myself, maybe I'll have those on request, because I'm only by myself. It's harder to say I'm gonna make 20 sweaters, and then I'm gonna make 50 mittens, and then I'm gonna make 100 beanies. I just made a few of them, hoping that maybe if somebody sees them, they would say, can you make them for me in red or in blue or in black, or can you mix these colors for me? The reason why I did that is because they're so easy to make, and they're so quick to make. So it's not gonna take so much of my time in the winter time, where I get like a sweater. If I get an order for a sweater which takes longer, at least I can take a break from the sweater and just make the mittens, which I can finish them in 2 hours.
Right. When you knit, like if you forget about the sale part of it, right? What's your favorite thing to knit? Do you prefer sweaters, or do you prefer something small and quick?
I like making, my preference is, if I dwell on one thing, I get bored easily. I need to switch. So I don't make sweaters at a go. I don't make like 5 sweaters at a go. I have to break in between and just make a sweater and then break and make a beanie. Make a 5 or 6 beanies and then break. And in between that breaking, when I'm making a beanie, then I'm like, oh, that color would be nice in a sweater, Then I go to a yarn store and I browse around, and I'm like, oh, I've never really, played around with this color. Then I get excited, then I'll get, a different color, then, and then I'm like excited again to make another sweater. So the colors for me, and then taking a break, those, help me with inspiration, and also, planning ahead what's going to be my next project.
Do you have a favorite fiber that you like always?
I love alpaca. For me, now I've fallen into merino. They're kind of similar to each other, but alpaca was my first chunky yarn that I fell in love with, and I still love it, mainly because it's very warm. And now I've been also in love with merino. And then for beanies, I enjoy making beanies. I think there's something special about tweed.
I love
tweed. Yeah, tweed for me, it's just so, I don't know, it's so English. Yeah.
But it's also like this, they're like little mini jewels, so you get something interesting without like really doing anything. You just the texture of it.
Yeah, I like tweed, and I really wish I had more male clients, because tweed is a great, a tweed beanie is excellent for a guy, so slowly I'm gonna start, making my friends, model my stuff, with tweed, and see how they feel about it, and then start making more, if I get male friends that would wear, some of my tweed beanies, that's great for me, because I love tweed for guys. But it's sad, because sometimes it's not sad, but I think when I've displayed my stuff in markets, mostly if guys are walking around, they're thinking, oh, it's female garments, really, they would look, some of them, but I think if I could catch them with tweed, then that's it.
You need to make a poster with some guy wearing some cool tweed beanie, and that's gonna catch everybody's attention.
Yeah.
I find like people a lot of times are very visual. So if you show them the image, they're like, oh, I want to be just like that. But like otherwise they see it and they don't really know how to style it.
That's so true. They are. Yeah. I've noticed that if I would post a photo of just a beanie sitting, like, laying on flat, it doesn't get as much attention to if I'm wearing a beanie and I take a photo of me wearing a beanie or somebody else wearing a beanie. People are very, very visual. They
I actually think it's very important because a lot of artists, fiber artists, we like solitary creatures. We're sitting on the sofa, we're knitting on our own, right? And we are more comfortable showing our work than showing our faces and telling the story about our work than telling a story about ourselves. And I like that was one of the reasons I created this series of interviews, because I wanted people to get introduced to the artists behind the work. And I find that like whenever I use Marie Antoinette here as a display, yeah, you'll get some likes. But then if I throw it on, or if my son will like model for me, people going nuts, like everybody's commenting, everybody's engaged. It just makes it so much more personable.
Yeah, yeah. It's there's a lot of pressure when you're designing and having to show your things. Sometimes I'm exhausted. I'm like, yeah, well, I've spent so many hours in this garment. I'm just gonna lay it flat and just
Right.
take the photos. And then, maybe a week later, I'm like, oh, I feel like putting on my makeup and just, showing it off that way. Then I do that. But I think as a designer, we carry a lot, there's so much work that we do because we do it all by ourselves. You have to sit and knit and then, take photos, and it's just too much work. But, one step at a time.
Yeah. Do
Yeah.
you ever play music while you knit? Like how is DJing came into your life? Like I mean, I saw you jam there and you like totally into this whole groove and
I'm I've been DJing for so many years, and I thought I would become a club DJ, but as I got older and as I fell more in love with knitting, I realized that I'm happy being home knitting than having to go out and partying, and then I slowly moved out of the party scene, and I decided, you know what? I'm gonna put on my headphones and start knitting. And after a while, I was like, oh wait, why don't I just start creating mixes for the knitting community? Just make a mix and put it out there, where people could listen to music while knitting. And it's the rhythm of me, like the way I knit. If I want to finish a project fast, I have to listen to music because I'm dancing at the same time and I'm just flowing and flowing and flowing. But if I'm sitting and watching like a film or a documentary, I move slow, because the content is completely different to, listening to music. So music for me is a big thing. It goes hand in hand with knitting. Yeah.
what do you decide like what's your favorite go-to music?
I'm a big fan of house music, deep house, techno, which is big in Russia. And then I love my jazz. I love South African. South Africa has different genres type of music, so I'm always keeping up with what's happening in South Africa music wise, so it also depends on the mood, that I'm in. How do I feel? Like I don't force anything, I would never say, oh yeah, well, today's music, I don't plan ahead that tomorrow is going to be a jazz day. I just go with how I feel, especially with the project that I'm dealing with. When I'm making cable, because cable is so calculative and you need to concentrate so much, I like to be slow, either like ambient music or jazz, something very slow, because if I get distracted while I'm like getting into my groove, then those cables are not going to work out well. So I
They'll
need
be
to,
dancing in different directions.
yeah, yeah, the calculations are not going to come out right. So, yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the whole cultural influence of South Africa. So I saw some of your cooking, and let me tell you, you girl, you made me hungry. That bread you make, that stew you make, it's like, I mean, to me, like South Africa has all these like rich flavors, and there's also like a big mixture of, because there's like so many people from different places, so there's like a lot of different influences. Do you feel like your whole approach to like everything, to you, to your like, to your personality, the fact that you're doing DJing, but then you're doing yoga, you're doing doula stuff, and then you're doing knitting, like it's all like such a mixed pot in a sense. Do you think it's all comes from that cultural heritage of yours?
Yeah, it does. So firstly, with caregiving and knitting, when I moved here in the United States, to me, those two careers were so easy to get into because I was raised in a family where caring was, we saw my grandmother, my family, my parents, care was, you cared for somebody who was sick, you cared for your neighbor. And when somebody would be pregnant, the whole family would be there caring for a pregnant mom, and after giving birth, we cared for the mom and the baby, so doula became so much easier for me into that. And then cooking was something where we learned as teenagers, where it's your turn to cook today, and then it's my cousin's turn to cook tomorrow, it's my other cousin's turn to cook the next day. So I've been cooking from a very young age, and so cooking became so easy to me in such a way that I don't follow directions, I just cook, and a dish that was cooked by my grandmother or my mother or my aunt, is something that I've learned from a very young age, including bread, so it's definitely a big part of where I come from and my family, how they raised me.
What's the comfort food for you? Like, what's the, if you miss home, what would you make?
So I love lamb. We were big lamb eaters at home, and for big holidays, with my grandmother would make like a leg of lamb, which I still make, for holidays if I'm having friends over. I love stews, so that's comforting for me. Stews with dumpling, or you take the bread dough and throw it on top of the stew, and you close it, you let the dumplings cook. We have a dish called, it's a Xhosa dish, which is umngqusho, and it's
I'll need the lesson.
and it's basically samp and beans. Samp is some sort of corn, and then beans, it's legume beans, but you have to, they cook for a while, and you can either add your potatoes or your carrots or anything green, and add your flavors into it, anything for me that's hearty, that makes my body warm. I just love, like, stews and soups, lentil soups were big in my grandmother's house, so I could go through the whole summer season of not really seriously cooking, maybe doing some fish and salads or light dishes like that. But when it comes to winter, like fall and winter, I take my cooking seriously, because it's time for stews, it's time for soups. I don't care whether I make the same dish over and over and over. Every season I make the same dish. I love it. I'm still gonna make it,
Right.
So
Well,
yeah.
I want to ask you about something. So Karen Osapir introduced me to you at first, from Og for Needs, and she was a guest of my channel as well. And recently, like last week, this week or last week, she posted the video about a day of self-care where her mom sent her money for chocolate. She bought a whole bar of chocolate and ate it in that 1 hour, the entire thing, with some tea and like the soak for her feet and some mask and like doing her hair and whatever. How do you take care of yourself? How do you spoil yourself? Is yoga your way of being like taking care of you?
I have so many things that I do for myself. Yoga is one. I like soaking in a tub with Epsom salt, or just soaking my feet and my hands because I use them a lot. Somebody told me I should start soaking them in green tea. I've been doing that. And I love doing massage sessions, which is amazing. And if I don't have a lot of time for that, let's say I'm sitting in bed, it's late and I'm knitting and I've been working through the sweater and it's taking forever. My neck is sore, my back, my shoulders. I like dry brushing, it's almost like lymphatic drainage, and I just do like light, dry brushing to take that tension off, and it actually works wonders. Like all the soreness, the muscle tightness goes away, as I just brush off, because I do not want to end up being frustrated, with a project that I'm almost done with, because it does get exhausting, when you have to knit to sell. When you're knitting to have fun, your projects could take 5 months to make, because you're not in any rush. But for me, this is the busiest season for me, and right now I'm already feeling overwhelmed with, oh my God, where do I begin? But doing self-care is like I always make sure that I do that. And also my body indicates it to me that you're tired, so at least, why don't you soak yourself in a tub, or your feet to your hands, or take a shower, do some yoga, it's a must. Or eat chocolate.
Right. Or
Yeah.
stew.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So what are you working on now? Like what's you said it's busiest time. What are you knitting right now?
So I have a friend who owns an interior design company in Rye, New York, and across from her store, I met another lady who owns a boutique store, and she wanted somebody who can make beanies for her. So I've been working since last week. I'm making beanies for her store, and it's taking forever because I'm doing the rib stitch, and it's not my favorite. I love rib beanies, but if it's like a repetition of 40, 50 heads, then yeah, I need to break it into doing like a stockinette, because stockinette goes faster,
Right.
but rib for me slows me down, it slows me down. So I'm working on that now. And I had already made, I think I was ahead this year. About a month ago, I made so many beanies in such a way that I'm so relaxed that, if I have another market, I already have stuff to sell. I can rather just work on this lady's project and make sure that everything comes out, good, perfect. And then I can take another week or 2 weeks break after working on this head without any worry of saying I don't have anything to sell, and then from there move on to the winter colors now, because I made a lot of fall colors, and then I'm ready to move on to the winter colors when I'm starting to knit for my business.
Right. Are
Yeah.
you a perfectionist? Like if you make a mistake, do you frog it down and redo it?
Yeah, I think I always say Anita is gonna see that mistake. I'm always saying that. I know a lot of people would never see it that do not knit, but I'm like, Anita's gonna see that mistake. I'm gonna unravel that. And also I would never be happy. There's that guilt that it's at the back of my mind where, oh, no, and I'm selling. So it's like, no, And I used to have a friend who would say to me, but I think the imperfectionist of it is what makes it unique, which, yeah, but I'm a perfectionist. Yeah, including weaving, like weaving for me, if I didn't weave it the right way, I have to undo it again because yeah, it's not gonna look right in my eyes.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you had like, what's your best customer experience, and have you had any unpleasant customer service experiences with your knitting?
Everywhere for me is the best experience, and I probably had bad experience, but I always shrug it out. I don't let that clog my mind. So I easily forget about the things that are really not important to me. I don't get really hurt easily like that, because I just feel like if somebody would say an unpleasant thing to me, then they really don't know anything about the craft. So if I had a bad experience, I probably shrugged it out. But I think I've been lucky enough to be around, like when I go to craft fairs, that's my favorite, like craft fairs and markets. It's my favorite because the community is amazing, including the other vendors. We support each other, because we know how hard it is. And then we have a lot of other people, which is the community, that really support the craft. There's a lady in LA who, the first craft fair that I did, she does unique markets. She's very smart at how she create these markets. She rents a big building, all the way up, and she'll get food vendors, she'll get, everything entertaining kids, so that by the time you're up there, you're there to do the shopping around that market. So the people that go into these market already know what they're looking for, unique, handmade, and things like that. So I always choose, my markets very well, like the craft fairs that I go to really, really well. Now the what's sort of coming up in my mind, or my wish list, because I love to travel, is I wish I could be in Maine. I wish I could go to Maine, or I wish I could go to like a different other place to sell my stuff, where I get a different atmosphere.
Right.
People are always going to be the same because they're there to shop handmade and something that's being crafted by a special individual. It's just the atmosphere and a different place. That's what I long for now.
Well, like hopefully COVID is gonna slow down sometime soon and we can start traveling again.
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah.
Well, I wish you the very best in your business development and in your fairs and your travels and everything. And, I'm going to put the links to your website and to your Instagram under this video so people can find you, and maybe some guys can buy those beanies that we talked about.
I hope so. I hope so.
Well, thank you so very much for being my guest today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much, Sharana. And this was just amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a nice chat, and it was nice meeting you.
Thank you.